It is West Virginia football time right here at the Voice of College Football each and every Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time, or whatever time we are able to schedule it each and every week. That's why it's important to subscribe. Hit that bell for the notification to know when we go live, because we do have 2 and 3 and 4 schedules to coordinate at times. Therefore, sometimes you got to be flexible in life, folks. We got Gold and Blue Dude here. We got Joey Foster. We've got the two most ardent, fervent, knowledgeable West Virginia fans that I know.
Are you?
Yeah, well,
we're doing a show tonight. Boys, how are we doing tonight?
It's a kickoff to the weekend, so I'm doing great. The way I look at things, because I'm a diehard college football fan, is we have another week behind us towards the 2023 college football season.
Yeah, that's how I'm looking at things too. It's like somebody said, well, Joey, we're only a month out of college football. I said, that just makes us a month closer to college football. So I'm excited.
There you go.
We are only a month removed from the national championship game, but the last regular season game is the last weekend of November. And so that's what we're really moving toward, is the first week of September, really the last weekend of August for any kind of football. So it's a long ways, but at the same time, 52-week year. Maybe I'll do the math while you guys are on.
Well, I always look forward to spring games
from tomorrow until college football. Yes, the spring games. But Joey, here's the deal with me in the spring games. I get excited for spring football, but then as soon as I flip them on and I watch like 3 plays, it reminds me, oh yeah, this is spring football.
Yeah.
I get all excited, like, oh, I want to see the Ohio State spring game and the Michigan spring game and this spring game and all these other spring games. And I sit through them and take notes because I want to get updated on the personnel and what's going on. But in terms of watching a football game, it's pretty
rough. Yeah, it reminds you how far out the season is again. You know, once the spring game is over, then it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot. This is nowhere close to the regular season.
I like to watch the spring game for just a couple of reasons. Number one, kind of figure out what kind of speed we're going to have, like on defense or something. And number two, just to see how people can read, how good somebody is at reading a play and how they react. Other than that, there's really not much you can take out of it.
There's one thing that I like to take out of spring games. If you watch a spring game, you can tell how excited the fan base is. This year, I don't expect a very big turnout for the West Virginia spring game because the fan base is just, they're not into Neil Brown right now. If we were bringing in a new head coach, I think we'd see a large crowd. Now, some of these schools pack out the stadium no matter what, but usually you can tell the attitude and the mood of the fan base by just seeing how big the crowd is at a spring game.
Right, and I think a lot of people are looking forward this year to October 12th, which is the weekend we will go to Houston and take on Dana.
I think that's a missed opportunity, though. I think that should have been playing in Morgantown.
Oh, I do too. I think it would have had much better television ratings and everything had that game been in Morgantown.
That was a head scratch. I would have swapped Houston and Cincinnati. Go on the road for Cincinnati. Bring Houston to us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Joey, like CBD and I talked about the other night, and I'm sure he talked about on his channel, when you're the Big 12 and you're not one of the big fish, you're not the SEC, you're not the Big 10, you got to take advantage of those opportunities to create as much drama, as many storylines and narratives and buzz out there as you possibly can. And they should have seen that. Dana Hogerson comes back to West Virginia. People get riled up. It was right there. It's not going to be the same if they schedule that game the next year. It's not going to be quite the same.
I also think they missed another opportunity by leaving Oklahoma on the schedule, but taking Texas off. Because, I mean, Oklahoma has dominated West Virginia since we've been in the Big 12, right? So they could have taken that off the schedule and put Texas on the schedule, because that's about as close to a rivalry as we have. I think the series is exactly split, 6 wins and 6 wins for both teams. So to me, I think that's a missed opportunity. The thing about what Mark said is it's not necessarily going to be a national appeal every time, but you're not the SEC. So you have to look for every opportunity. Is this better than that? Because guess what? Oklahoma and Texas are not going to be in the Big 12 for much longer. This might be their last year. So guess what? You missed out on the opportunity of one more West Virginia Texas game, the tiebreaker game. On top of that, could have been labeled the tiebreaker game. With Texas on the way out. I don't understand the scheduling.
Yeah, because if you think about through the years, West Virginia, Texas, and West Virginia and Oklahoma, even though Oklahoma has dominated by winning the series, the games have always been good and close and great games, with the exception of maybe two. But it's been really good, close games. We're talking 56, 54, scores like that, 51, 48, crazy scores. So they always got really high ratings. So, yeah, I'm kind of lost with the schedule. Somebody in the chat I don't remember where it was, said that the Big 12 kind of threw West Virginia under the bus with the schedule. I agree.
Sort of. Whenever I first saw the schedule, I was, Mark already knows, I was super, super mad. But then whenever I really looked at it, I mean, when you think about it, they gave us all 4 of the new teams. So it's not, you look on there and you see 5 road games, you add the out of conference, that's 6. That's the same as last year. This was the year that we were supposed to get the 5 road games. So, I guess they just stuck to that schedule. And they did give West Virginia all 4 of the new teams coming in, and we don't have to go to BYU, which would have been the longest trip out of the 4 new teams coming in. We don't have to play Kansas State. That's going to help us. Who else? Kansas, who bit us in the rear end, which that would have been a road game this year. I think that's a loss. So I don't think we got totally screwed, but there's some things that they missed big time.
Texas, Kansas State are 2 pretty good teams to miss from that standpoint.
In Texas, yes.
GBD is going to lead us in a discussion about some really hot news percolating out there right now involving Arizona State that could affect the Pac-12. But before we get to that, we also have something else concerning the Pac-12 or the Big 12 here. As reported by ESPN and Pete Thamel and others, the negotiations for Oklahoma and Texas to leave the Big 12 a year early and join the SEC in 2024 have stalled, and a deal is not expected to come to fruition, sources told ESPN Friday. So after weeks of negotiations, Texas, Oklahoma slated to join the SEC in 2025. Sources told the parties that they tried to come to terms to move that up, but they're having issues with basically sides could not agree on how to create equitable value for what Fox would lose in 2024 with 7 football games featuring Oklahoma and Texas that command premium advertising. So they can't get together on that.
I think that tells me is they're not agreeing to do out of conference on Big 12 campuses. They turned that down. That's what that tells me.
Yeah.
And I think that's a loss. I don't think that's a loss for Texas and Oklahoma. I know they want to leave early. I think that's a loss for the Big 12 because the sooner they leave, the more money the Big 12 gets. And on top of that, you would get that extra bonus of Texas and Oklahoma playing road out of conference games in Big 12 campuses. So I think that's a loss for the Big 12.
All right, which leads us to the rumors circulating throughout the day and the buzz involving Arizona State that could impact GBD, the Big 12.
Yeah, overall. So the biggest problem that started all this is the Pac-12 still does not have a TV deal done. And from what I've seen all over the place, multiple sources saying that the offer from ESPN to the Pac-12 is around $25 million per team per year. That is bad, really, really bad. And on top of that, they're expecting Oregon and Washington to ask for unequal revenue share. So they're probably going to ask, for a certain percentage to get them up near 40 million. So everybody else is going to be down, around 20 million or less. It's going to be bad. So what I'm hearing is that Arizona State is very, very unhappy with this. And from what I've heard, it seems like Arizona State will be the team to lead the charge for the Pac-12 teams that will jump to the Big 12. Now, it said Arizona State leading 3 other teams. It didn't list the 3 other teams, but, from what we've been hearing and talking about for the past 6 months, we're all thinking it's going to be the 4 corner schools: Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. But who knows? You never know. A curveball could be in there, in Oregon State, or Washington State. I don't know. But I guess the betting odds would be Arizona State, then Arizona, Colorado, and Utah coming to the Big 12. And when I say coming to the Big 12, I'm talking within the next year. I'm talking a possible announcement before the 2023 college football season. That's how bad this situation is as far as the TV deal negotiation. Now, if a miracle comes along and ESPN all of a sudden bumps that up to, 35 million, then all this goes away. But ESPN doesn't need a deal with the Pac-12. They're trying to. They want one, but they're going to lowball it because they don't need it. The Pac-12 needs the deal with ESPN. So the leverage is 100% with ESPN. Fox backed out of it a long time ago. I know they're trying to do a second tier with Amazon, but the main tier is with ESPN, and it's not looking good for the Pac-12. And Arizona State is probably the maddest out of all the teams right now.
And the way you eyeball that, let's say your 25 to 35 million is a pretty good estimate on what it would take to keep Arizona State and these other schools around. You got to remind everyone, of course, that we're not just talking about $10 million. We're talking about $10 million per team. So then we're talking about ESPN coughing up an extra 100 million plus 1 to 120. And so that's some serious cash for them to consider.
Yeah. And they are very apart from the table on this one.
My curious, what would make me curious and wonder is, will the Big Ten open back up to, if it should the 4 corners, let's just say Arizona State jumps, just them. They decide, okay, we're jumping, and nobody else does it at that time, but Arizona State does. Does that entice the Big Ten to open up to get Oregon and Washington before they decide to jump and come to the Big 12?
No, the AntiTrust lawsuit will keep that from happening unless, and we talked about this last night on my live show, and I did some digging to look this up. So if the Pac-12 gets down to 7 members, then the NCAA can vote to take away their Power 5 status, and then that unprotects them, and they either have to add more members or dissolve. When that protection of being a Power 5 is taken off of them, then that antitrust lawsuit can't happen because they are no longer a Power 5 member. So I'm thinking the Big Ten is playing the waiting game. They want to wait until the Pac-12 gets down to 7, then they can invite Washington and Oregon. Otherwise, you're looking at a big fat antitrust lawsuit.
Right. I just think that the Pac, before that will happen, though, I just feel like the Pac will reach out to San Diego State.
That doesn't matter. That wouldn't matter. It's the members. It's the current members.
Current members.
You add new members. That doesn't count. That doesn't factor into the deal. Well, I guess they could technically factor it into their heads, but they don't have to, is what I'm saying.
So again, if the Pac-12, which is now 10 without USC, UCLA, goes down to 6 with the 4 schools that we're talking about moving to the Big 12, you're saying that by the letter of the law, from what you're digging up, the NCAA wouldn't necessarily have to count any additions like SMU, San Diego State toward that 7.
Right.
I wonder why they make the number 7.
It used to be half of whoever signed of the teams that signed so let's say the last TV deal, 12 teams signed, right? So under this current TV deal, half would have been the number. So if the Pac-12 got down to 6 of those teams, then they wouldn't necessarily be out of the protection, but they could be subject to it. The NCAA then decides if they take that off or not. And then that next rule comes up where in order to even remain a conference, you have to add teams or disband. It's 2 separate things. The Power 5 is basically protection and allows that antitrust lawsuit to play into effect. Once that's taken off, you don't have Power 5 status, but you can still exist as a conference as long as you add more members. That's why Conference USA went out and got Jacksonville State, Liberty, New Mexico State, Sam Houston, and Kennesaw State because they were under the number. Had they not done that, they would have had to have disbanded.
I do feel like this. I mean, like I say, I've not seen the numbers that you're saying, but 25 million per team in the Pac-12 is absolutely horrible. But I'm wondering how much. How much Arizona State would water down the Big 12? They're not going to add any value as far as raising that. So if we take,
I don't know about that, Joey, because I know they don't 100% capture the Phoenix market, but they do open up the Big 12 to the Phoenix market. And according to the TV deal, we know that in the letter of the law, if the Big 12 adds any more group of 5 teams, then there's, the revenue is not going to be bumped up according to the deal. But if they add Power 5 teams, then the deal can be renegotiated according to the value of the team bringing in. So it just depends on what the Big 12 would decide on that.
So do we know how much each Big 12 team, if nothing changes, each Big 12 team is going to make with the new TV deal?
I think it was 41 million.
Did you say 31?
41. I think it's 41. Yes.
So 41 times 12, you're in the $400 and $540 million range, something like that. So you're looking at, if you bring in 4 teams and they don't renegotiate, then you're really going to water it down.
Yeah, but that clause in the contract allows for the renegotiation. The way it's worded is they are encouraging the Big 12 to expand with Power 5 teams because the competition is ESPN. So they're thinking that the only 2 conferences that the Big 12 could possibly add as far as Power 5 would be the ACC and the Pac-12. And who has the main TV rights to those 2 conferences? ESPN. So the thinking behind it is hurt their competition. Hey, Big 12, if you go out and get us some teams that ESPN has a TV deal with, then there's a thing in the contract where we can renegotiate. So it encourages the Big 12 to do that. So I would think that if they did add teams, that it would be renegotiated. Otherwise, the relationship between Fox and the Big 12 might go down the tubes.
I just think that if we look at that 25 million in the Pac-12, most of that's going to fall under Oregon and Washington. They're the largest fan base. So that's why I'm just afraid that other teams would just water down and would not add value to the conference, and that's why I don't feel like.
But that's for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 kissing the rear end of Oregon and Washington. That doesn't mean they're not valuable. It just means that the Pac-12 is trying to keep Washington and Oregon. It means they're not paying them what they're worth because ESPN is lowballing the Pac-12.
If those other 4 schools leave and I'm Washington and Oregon, I'm most likely leaving for the Big 12. And I would think the Big 12 would love to have those 2.
Absolutely, for sure.
That's another thing right there. And
then you've got
you bring in Oregon and Washington, and your revenue is going through the roof. Now, we know that Washington and Oregon have come out and said no Big 12. But if it's Big 12 or bust, then you're going to take the Big 12. I'm interested to see. This is what I'm looking at, all right? I do think that the 4 corners go to the Big 12. I really do. After that happens, I want to see if the NCAA votes to take that Power 5 status off of the Pac-12. And I think they will, because they would be down to 6 members if that happens. I really do. Even if they go out and get San Diego State, Boise State, whatever. As far as Power 5 teams, they would only have 6 in there. Then once that happens, I do think the Big Ten opens the door for Oregon and Washington because then you can't have an antitrust lawsuit against you. So it just depends on if the NCAA takes that label off the Pac-12. Because if they don't, then that's probably not going to happen. They might be, honestly, if they don't take that off, Oregon and Washington might be stuck in the Pac-12.
It would have been interesting to have Travis in here tonight and maybe had him look over the agreement for the Pac-12 and see where they stand. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it's a really bad. maybe something comes along and the TV deal gets better and the Pac-12 stabilizes for a while. But I still think in the long run, the Pac-12 is in a bad spot. Even if they get through this somehow and make it to the next deal, the days are numbered for the Pac-12, in my opinion.
I just look at the Big 12 and how when Texas and Oklahoma left, we jumped on 4 group of 5 teams, brought them in. It didn't affect us pretty much at all. I mean, our value would have been a little bit higher if Oklahoma and Texas would have stayed in, actually, But I just think that the Pac-12, I feel like they're probably already looking at San Diego State, Fresno State, maybe SMU or Rice or somebody. I just feel like they're already looking in that direction and probably will add before people start leaving.
Here's the thing that we're all missing, though. The attitudes of the teams that were left, I say left, but not really left. Oklahoma and Texas decided to go to SEC, right? The teams remaining. Their attitude is way different than the teams that would be left in the Pac-12. And because of this TV, I just think the ego of the Pac-12 and all that, everything, attitude, ego plays into this. I think it's a different situation from what the Pac-12 or from what the Big 12 was in than what the Pac-12 was in. I think that the Pac-12 losing USC and UCLA actually hurts them more than what losing Oklahoma and Texas did to the Big 12. I'm not saying they're better brands. That's not what I'm saying. I think Texas and Oklahoma are the better brands if you compare 2 versus 2. But I think as far as affecting the conference, I think the Pac-12 losing USC and UCLA and that LA market hurts them far worse than the Big 12 losing Oklahoma and Texas. That's just my opinion, though.
But are you partially saying that because the Big 12 was able to rebound off of that and bring in the 4 that they did? Now, if they wouldn't have been able to bring in those 4 and they were sitting there with 8.
Oh, yeah, the numbers would be in favor of the Pac-12.
I'm curious as to how big that LA market is with all the pro team and all the pro sports they have.
Yeah.
How many people are actually sitting there in LA watching college ball?
Exactly.
UCLA, not so much. But when USC is good, they have a pretty good handle on that market. Now, do they have competition? Yes. The thing, you have to look at ratio too, like proportion. Like, okay, so the market that they have in LA is, I don't even know how many times bigger than what, the West Virginia market is, but it is exponentially bigger. So the ratio, now I'm just eyeballing it here. So the ratio would be if USC can capture, I don't know, 10%, 5% of that market, that's the same thing as West Virginia, capturing 100% of that market. So you have to look at ratios too.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the LA second, number 2, it's either number 2 or number 1 in the nation.
Number 2.
Number 2, yeah. So, you don't have to capture as much of a percentage as some of these other schools.
I wonder because I know there was some talk last year about sort of not necessarily a merger between the ACC and Pac-12, but an agreement for scheduling to try to get some more TV revenue in there for both conferences. So
by doing what? Just creating better matchups?
I think creating a matchup. Yeah, I think there was some talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't know how far that talk went at all. I just know there was rumors of it. Those rumors were coming from everyone from 365 to 247, and I even heard them on ESPN. But it doesn't mean that anything was going to come out of it. Just that there was talk. So I'm wondering I'm just wondering if the ACC could come in and kind of be the saving grace for the Pac-12 right now.
Yeah, that's what I made a video on that earlier. Actually, I think honestly, to me, I think the ACC either picking up a large chunk of them or just straight up merging with the Pac-12. I think it would help both conferences, especially the merger. The merger, I think, would help both the Pac-12 and the ACC because think about this. If the ACC merges with the Pac-12, even if, let's say they keep the grant of rights for the ACC, all right, in the merger. That's the terms of the deal. You have to keep the ACC. Well, guess what? The number of teams needed to vote to dissolve that grant of rights now jumped significantly. So now instead of 8 teams, you're looking at probably 12, 14, something like that. And the ACC definitely wouldn't have the numbers to do that. So they would be able to save themselves and save the Pac-12 at the same time. And besides geography, I think the two conferences are very, very similar as far as, the academic side of things as well.
We also have to remember that when Oklahoma and Texas were leaving the Big 12, many people started speculating that was the end of the Big 12. They were done, tossed them out. They're relegated to a group of 5 team or a group of 5 conference now. And that wasn't the case at all. There was plenty of options for us, and we went out and got the best ones available. I know there's no really good programs available like that as far as for the Pac-12 outside of maybe a Boise State that's not going to be in the same category as a BYU, for instance. But, I just think there's a few good teams they could pick up, but I don't see anything that's going to add value to the Pac-12.
Well,
and
it shows the big whiff that they should have taken BYU. Now it's double hurting them right now. Which, by the way, Connor Johnson, I see that Anchorman reference. That was pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, it all depends on what is being prioritized by these leagues, which, of course, first and foremost is going to be money, which equals, what's the biggest factor in the money is, of course, the brand name of the football brand and the TV market. And Boise State's a great ad from a football standpoint. They'd be a nice ad from a football standpoint, but TV market, no. Academics, no. For an academically driven Pac-12, they're going to be showing some desperation if they take Boise State. I think they're going to do that very reluctantly. I think they're going to go San Diego State. I think their priorities are San Diego State 1, SMU 2, and then probably Fresno State 3. Then if they had to add a 4th, that's what all that Boise State has to add to the Pac-12 is a good football team. Right. They're not giving them anything else.
I do feel like Rice would probably be the number 2 or 3 pick.
Yeah, that would be a good one. I would say SMU, Rice, San Diego State, Fresno State.
But Joey, you said
2 Texas schools.
Joey, you said a few minutes ago that you did not think that once the 4 schools were added to the Big 12, that Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 hurts the Big 12.
Well, no, I'm not meaning it like that. I mean, sure, it hurts the Big 12. What I meant is we were able to save ourselves with the four schools.
Absolutely.
We didn't lose a lot of value as far as television. As far as if we're going to get in the neighborhood of 40 million, that's not as good as it could have been with Oklahoma and Texas here by any means, but not as bad as it could have been with losing them as well.
Sure.
Not as bad as it could have been, and softening the blow I can buy, but keeping it from hurting the Big 12, I got to disagree with that. Like it's still the Big 12 significantly.
Sure it did. I'm not meaning anything except for it could have been a lot worse.
Yes, I do agree with that.
Yes, Texas and Oklahoma. I don't know what the percentage of the value of the league is. I've heard 40%. Those 2 schools out of the 10 before the 4 added was. It would be 20% if everybody was created equal, but more like 40% of the league, the value of the league that they were taking with them.
Yeah, almost half. That was a large chunk. But I do agree that bringing in those 4 brands, and those were the 4 best brands you could have brought in as far as Group of 5 goes.
Yep.
I think that was smart, and I think that was the best they could do in the situation. The only thing that they could have done better was if they could get some teams from another Power 5 conference, which that was not on the table at the time. I think Yormark is very business savvy. I think him going out to the state of Washington and trying to grab Gonzaga, which I do think they will grab Gonzaga, he can use that as bait. In fact, I'm going to do a video on this tomorrow. He can use that as bait to maybe attract I mean, who knows? Maybe a Washington State. I mean, Gonzaga's out there in Spokane. You never know. But even if it's not a Washington school, to keep luring those Pac-12 teams over to Big 12, all you have to do is say, "Hey, look at your TV deal with ESPN. It's crap. We just made ourselves not only the best basketball league in the entire nation, but the undisputed elite basketball conference in the nation." They bring in Gonzaga, and there's no argument. The Big 12 is the best basketball conference in the nation.
Yeah, there is no doubt getting Gonzaga in. John, I kind of agree with what you say, but I think that squeeze around our neck is kind of easing up now. And
he did have the hands around,
right? And unfortunately, yes. I think that squeeze around the squeeze around the neck now is with the Pac-12.
It's a hand on the shoulder right now, just kind of like, I'm here. Yeah. We're still here.
I am hearing. It's kind of died off, but it's something to think about. All right, just something to think about. That the SEC could be interested in West Virginia and Oklahoma State. And people laugh at me when I say West Virginia. They were interested in West Virginia before when it came down to Texas A&M and either Missouri or West Virginia. And a lot of people are saying that if West Virginia would have won that national championship in 2007, we would be in the SEC right now. But ultimately, ESPN told the SEC, go with Missouri. That's who they went with. But I am hearing that they could be interested in West Virginia and Oklahoma State in the future. Not right now, but in the future.
Why would they grab West Virginia and Oklahoma State instead of Florida State and Miami?
That's what I'm saying. It might be to see what happens with the ACC. If the ACC goes down, then heck no. No, that you're saying in the Big 12, we're going to go after those. But if somehow the ACC can save themselves and keep those 8 teams from voting and lock everybody in, then that would be the next choice.
Whether I'm the SEC or the Big Ten, but especially the Big Ten because of the recruiting footprint that the Big Ten needs. The Big Ten's only weakness in all of this is that they don't have enough football players in their footprint. I'm going after Florida State and Miami.
If you're the Big Ten?
Yes. If I'm either one, that's my next move.
I agree.
I think they'll get second best because I truly think that Florida State and Clemson want to go to the SEC. But I think the Big Ten can get Miami. I think they can get North Carolina. I think it would be wise to get Georgia Tech. I know Georgia Tech is kind of down on football right now, but that's the Atlanta metro area. That is a hotbed of recruiting. And it kind of connects you down to – so instead of just having the state of Florida and then the Big Ten, it kind of, draws a path down to the state of Florida.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I looked at the same thing when all this broke loose last summer in terms of next options, and those are the lines that I drew as well.
The only thing about that is one of the big factors as far as getting an invite from the Big Ten is AAU status. And right now, Miami does not have AAU status. And the Big Ten has been pretty firm about this. The only team that they would let slide as far as not having AAU status would be Notre Dame. So if Miami doesn't get AAU status and the ACC does fall apart, they're not going to the Big Ten. They're probably going to the Big 12, which is not a terrible fallback. I know you want the Big Ten, you want the big money, but it's better than, oh, man, it's either we get into the Big Ten or we're going into oblivion. Like, that's what West Virginia was thinking whenever the Big 12 offered. It was like, man, we either got to take the Big 12 or we go down the tubes with the Big East. I think Miami is not going to have to worry about, falling into oblivion.
Yeah, I think there's a handful of programs left that have nothing to worry about. Now, obviously, they want to find the best spot, but they're going to land in a spot. Oregon's not going to go into oblivion. Somebody's going to take Oregon. Somebody's going to take Washington. Somebody's definitely going to take Clemson, Florida State, and Miami top shelf in the ACC. But even North Carolina's going to have a place at the big boy table for sure. Now, Wake Forest,
Boston
it could
College.
be a little dicey for Wake Forest and Boston College. Syracuse, I don't know. I would think that they might be in a little bit better position slightly.
I think the Big 12 could take Syracuse. Here's how I think it would happen. I don't know for sure, but here's how I think it would happen. I think that the SEC would get Clemson, Florida State, NC State, and Virginia Tech. And then the Big Ten is going after the biggest brands, but with AAU status. So that falls under North Carolina, Duke, Georgia Tech, and Virginia. Pitt does have AAU status, but compared to those brands, they're not big enough. So for the Big 12, you got 6 teams remaining. And the 2 weakest links are Boston College and Wake Forest. So that means those other 4, if they want it, will get invited to the Big 12 if all this happens. So you're talking about Syracuse, Pitt, Louisville, and Miami. It all depends on if Miami gets AAU status, because the SEC is not going to want Miami. Florida will pitch a fit. That's not happening. They'll take Florida State, but not Miami. If Miami gets AAU status, they're in the Big Ten. Easy. I don't know who they swap out for. Maybe Virginia. I don't know. But if they don't, they have the Big 12. I think the only 2 teams that have something to worry about as far as oblivion goes is Wake Forest and Boston College. And with the Pac-12, I think Oregon State needs to worry. I think Washington State needs to worry. And maybe, but not for sure, but maybe Cal and Stanford. Although I do think that there is some value in them for the Big Ten. It just depends on what the Big Ten wants to do. It'll be up to the Big Ten, basically.
I think that's just a lot. That's wild speculation, of course, obviously, and that's what you said. But I also just don't. I know you never say never, but I don't think that's going to ever happen like that. I think the ACC is fine and pretty solid right now. I don't know. I mean, would Miami and Florida State leave for the SEC or Big Ten? Absolutely. I believe they would want to. But with that grant of rights, could they? I just don't see it happening. I think right now,
there's a difference between being okay and being stuck. I don't think
right.
The ACC is okay. Now, if those 8 teams don't exist, then everybody's stuck. I don't think the conference is okay, because once 2036 hits, everybody's going to be gone.
Possibly.
I keep hearing different reports about where exactly this grant of rights stands and at what point. I think it runs to 2036.
Yep.
Right.
But before that, it is lowered in the next few years. Like in 2025, it's not quite as much as it would be. And the thing about contracts, they can always be renegotiated.
Yeah, but ESPN has the ACC by their what.
Sure.
So they're not going to renegotiate that.
According to Travis Kenobi, this contract is just a few pages long, very short and to the point. And he says that's generally the hardest contracts in the world to get out of, because there's no legal language that's 20 pages long that you can pick and choose from. This is very short and to the point that, hey, you can't go nowhere unless you pay us this, and that is kind of binding. So I have to take Travis's word on that to say there's nobody in the ACC going to be going anywhere for a while,
unless they reach that number to vote it.
Unless they vote to dissolve or something, right?
And this is, what we're talking about right here is Swofford's legacy, signing the dumbest contract he could have possibly signed, and it's just, I don't know how somebody could be that ignorant to do something like that. That was the biggest bonehead move I've ever seen by a conference commissioner.
Well, yeah, he may not have been able to foresee what's going on, but he was trying to obviously keep his conference. He was trying to safeguard his conference for many, many years is what he was looking to do.
Well, the buyout was smart. I like that because that keeps everybody locked in. It was, how much you're paying all your teams, and then having a clause where, things get really out of hand, you can vote to get out of this. It wasn't thought out as much as it should have.
Well, there might have been some pressure on him that if you're going to lock us in for that long, and there's that much money that has to be raised to get us out of it, then this is going to be what we're going to need to negotiate this. So, Yeah, we're going to have Tony Altimore on Monday at 6 Eastern, folks. So jump on in here Monday at 6, and we're going to try to run through this as not just in terms of what GBD brought to the table with Arizona State and the four corners of the Pac-12, but just kind of looking at, the next possible moves and what makes sense. And Tony obviously goes on GBD's show, and he's talked to all of us numerous times and does a great job in terms of outlining. We've got the football down. We know what the football is. We know the most valuable properties in terms of football, and then on the second level, we certainly know from a TV standpoint, TV markets, ratings, and all that sort of thing. What brands bring the biggest crowds to the TV sets? Then Tony delves into academic standings and endowments and AAU status, of course, as GBD mentioned, which Nebraska was an AAU school prior to joining the Big Ten, got into the Big Ten, and as I understand it right now, they are no longer in the AAU.
Yep.
So the Big Ten might look past that.
That might be something you could, argue as far as your case trying to get in the conference. Like, hey, I know they had AAU status when you voted them in, but they're a member and they don't have AAU status. So that could be an argument as far as, a team trying to get in. I saw a comment earlier that you put up there. Tim Prangley said Texas A&M or TAMU threw a fit whenever the SEC brought in Texas. That's a good point. So maybe it's not a good argument as far as why Miami wouldn't go to the SEC as far as Florida pitching a fit. I think the better argument is Miami is a private school and they don't have as big of a fan base as people think they do. It's large, but it's not Texas large. It's not Oklahoma large. It's not large enough to use up a spot that could go to somebody else. Especially since you already have two big universities in that state. Now, if they didn't have anybody in there and it was trying to get a footprint, then it would probably be worth that.
If these conferences cooperate with one another, they can also dictate that Notre Dame has to join a conference.
Yes. I don't know why they haven't done that yet. Maybe this expansion of 12 teams was a step towards that because of the way it was worded. The 6 conference champions auto bid, the 4 top champions get a bye. That's encouraging Notre Dame, but it's not forcing.
No.
We have to get past half measures. You have to go full measure with Notre Dame if you want to get them to join the conference because they will buck you. If you give them an out, they're going to take the out.
All you have to do is write a provision in the college football playoff eligibility to say you have to be eligible to win a conference championship to be entered into the college football playoff. And look at this list of independent teams. This isn't 1992 when it was West Virginia, South Carolina, Penn State, and you could name 50 legitimate football brands. We've whittled this down to, and I would love to know what the thinking is. Yeah, I would love to know what the thinking is at places like UMass and New Mexico. Is it New Mexico State or New Mexico? I get them confused.
Well, New Mexico was taken by Conference USA, so they're out.
Okay, so they're out. They're going to be out starting this year. So we're down to Liberty.
It was New Mexico State.
New Mexico State, UMass. That they're just floating around. What's their TV contracts look like? Who? They don't have a conference. Why are they even playing football? They're not going to win anything. They're lousy. Nobody goes to the games. They're not in a conference. You just wonder what in the world's going on with these schools. And now that Notre Dame or BYU being that second, biggest brand of the independents has joined
a national championship in recent history.
Yes. And now Notre Dame has to be forced. Yeah. I don't blame Notre Dame. That's not who I blame.
I do blame the excuse that they use. It makes us special. So you're special like UMass? Come on. I think that particular excuse. Now the other arguments and reasons I can understand, but they got to get rid of that argument. It's dumb. But I agree that all they have to do is put it in the contract. they should have done it in the playoff expansion because you were starting from a clean sheet. But you do have to realize that the athletic director for Notre Dame was in the process. But I mean, how many to one? That's one person. Does he really have that much power? There's no way. So there has to be a way to say, hey, we know you like being independent, but we're thinking about doing this thing where we split off from the NCAA, but you have to be a member of a conference. If you want to join their conference over there, the Big Ten, that's fine. If you want to join us, the SEC, that's fine. If you want to join the stragglers over there, the Big 12, that's fine. But join somebody, the ACC, the conference that you're dating, join them. I don't care. Join a conference.
Before we head out tonight, I would love to hear from both of you, and I will throw in my 2 cents as well. And we can look at each one of these conferences and basically make you the conference commissioner. And what would be your goals, your priorities? How would you handle the situation, and who would you target and go after, or how would you best protect your conference? So, Joey, let's start with you in the Big 12. The Big 12 is close to your heart, Joey. We'll start with you in the Big 12. Is there any moves that you would make? What would you do right now to best represent your conference?
I would just gauge interest from the bigger teams that, could possibly be looking to move a conference. That would be, looking at Oregon and Washington and the Four Corners. I would just gauge interest is all I would do. And, see where they stand. I know this much too. If I was the commissioner of the Pac-12 right now, I'm looking to add teams that you and I discussed, the SMU, the San Diego State, the Rice, add a few teams in there to try to solidify that conference a little bit. But that's not going to bring the television rights up. And if GBD's right about the $25 million, if that's what it is, I don't know how you would hold that conference together. But you do have Amazon, like he said, that may be coming in and adding to that. So it may increase it by, they might be able to increase it by 3 or 4 million a team, but I don't see them going to be increasing it by 20 million where it needs to be. I think if I was a Big Ten, and I still don't understand why they haven't gone after Oregon and Washington right now, why they shut the door down. But unless what GBD says is true, that they're just waiting for the Pac-12 to sort of fold it up on their own, and then there's no problem there. I think the ACC's fine. We know the SEC and Big Ten are fine. The Big 12, as far as I'm concerned, is fine right now where they are, but I'm still gauging the interest of everyone in the Pac-12 right now.
Not bad.
But bad. I don't like to speculate on who's going to go where or what's going to happen. It's interesting talk for 10 minutes. It's just not interesting talk to me for an hour. It's great to.
You've dragged you into it here for an hour.
Yeah, it's great to gauge it and look at it, but I'm just not. I don't like to speculate on all that stuff.
I do.
I know.
We
all know you do,
Chris. Do you?
Just a little bit.
I love it. I dream about it.
He's obsessed with it. He's obsessed with it.
Hey, it's a sickness.
So, Chris, we're going to throw you 5 hats. Each one of them represents the various conferences. So put each one on and tell us what you would do as conference commissioner.
For the Pac-12, I don't know what they can do. They just lost USC and UCLA. I would have done something before I lost them. I mean, they probably should have tried to negotiate this TV deal sooner than what they did. Now that market is gone. They need to lock down that TV deal ASAP. I would be talking to not just Amazon. I would be talking to YouTube, see what contract they can get me. I would be talking to Netflix. I would be talking to Hulu. I would be talking to every single streaming service out there, even if it's 1 million. Hey, you put enough streaming services together, that piles up. So I would go after as many avenues as possible as far as the streaming, because to be honest with you, I think streaming is the future of college football. I do. So if I was a Pac-12 commissioner, I would try to get ahead of this and try to lock down that market before it actually gets there, and then just straight up try to get the best TV deal through whoever your cable provider is going to be. I'm guessing ESPN. Now,
and with George Kliavkoff's background, you would think that would be at the forefront of his mind. He's supposed to be savvy and supposed to have gotten this job because of his entertainment.
Yep. I thought it was
awareness.
a good hire, and he's not making the moves that I thought he would make. And I would be making moves right now. I would not wait. Go try to get. I say try, but these teams are not going to turn you down. Go get San Diego State. Go get Fresno State, and go get SMU. If you want to get Rice, that's fine too. If you want to get Boise State and swap them out for SMU or Rice, whoever your teams you want, get them now. Establish them as a Power 5 team before it's too late. If they can be in the Pac-12 for a year, they're an established Power 5 team. Then those rules change as far as if the NCAA can take that cap off. So I would be making moves right now to get those teams. I would be talking to as many streaming services as possible, and of course lock down that ESPN deal. So you got to make as much money as possible. I'm not. The only thing that I'm torn on is I know Oregon and Washington would want unequal revenue share. I'm just not sure about that because
Falcons Pitt, I just unblocked you. You were right. You were blocked on Mark's main channel. I just unblocked you.
You don't want to run off your other brands. Yes, Oregon and Washington are your main brands and they're your most valuable brands, but you don't want to kiss their rear end at the expense of half your league. You know, if you're in survival mode, which you are right now, then you have to do what's best for the entire conference. You don't want to, tick off half your conference and they're gone, and then you're subject to getting your Power 5 status taken off, especially if Oregon and Washington are going to leave anyways. They're just in a bad spot over there. For the Big 12, I really like this move for Gonzaga. At first, I didn't because I'm like, it's a basketball school, not football. It adds nothing to football. That's true, but at the same time, it could help bait those teams from the Pac-12. I would also be keeping my eye on the ACC as well. And as soon as if it does happen and the grant of rights get exploded, I would go after teams that are attainable. Don't waste your pitches on Florida States and Clemson's and North Carolina and Virginia. I know it never hurts to try. Well, I understand that, but you're wasting energy on something that's not attainable. I would go out and lock down Syracuse, Pitt, Louisville, and either Virginia Tech or Miami. One of those two teams will be available. Either they'll take Virginia Tech or Miami. I'm talking about the SEC. If they get AU status, the Big Ten could get them. But what you're doing by getting those teams is you're strengthening your East side. And there's a lot of rivalries that are connected coming in from the ACC. Those teams are not only rivals of each other, but they're rivals of West Virginia and to a certain extent Cincinnati. So you're increasing the value on the eastern side of the conference. I do think the western side is important, but I think the Eastern is of more dire need right now. So, yes, you can address the Pac-12 and get those four corners, but just make sure you balance it out. Don't just focus on the West and then, West Virginia and Cincinnati, they'll be fine over there by themselves because you just never know in the future. So, do what you can. Brett Yormark is a great business mind. I think the Big 12 will lock down Gonzaga, and I do think it will help bait in the four corners. And then I do think that the ACC is in trouble as far as the grant of rights being voted. And the Big 12 needs to grab those four teams. Now, if you're the ACC, here's what I would do if I were the ACC. I would renegotiate that TV deal or try to, because we've heard that ESPN is willing to come to the table, right? So I would shorten the deal, okay? I would shorten the deal, but split the difference. Increase the pay. It doesn't have to be anything ridiculous like SEC or Big Ten pay, but just enough to make these teams happy. So in the long run, ESPN could potentially be saving money if they shorten the deal but increase the pay. And then once it's over, then you can renegotiate, and it would prove to the teams that you're willing to at least make an attempt to try to make them happy. Because you'd rather make more in 1 year than have to drag. It's almost like an annuity, right? At this point, 2036, that's a wow. And each year is not that much. So if you can shrink it and be like, hey, we want more per year, but we're willing to cut the deal in half. We'll say 2030, 2031, and instead of, and this is just me guessing, I don't know what the actual dollar is, but we'll say instead of, I don't know, $35 million a team, you give us $45 million a team. So it is 10 more a year. But if you do the math and they don't have to pay that 5 years, then ESPN could look at it as saving money, and then they could come to the table and see the value of the ACC once that deal is up. That's what I would do. I would try to shorten the deal, but at the same time, increase the pay. And that's showing good faith in your teams as well. You're like, hey, we know you're more valuable than this current deal. We know it's crappy. I didn't do it. It was a previous commissioner. We're going to try to fix this. We're going to shorten this deal and increase your revenue per year. That's what I would try to do. I don't know if that's possible, but I would at least attempt to do that as ACC commissioner. And then if you are, then you might be able to look around and see if you can grab a decent brand. That way, if teams do bolt, whenever that deal is up, you still have enough members to where, you can still have it. You have to always be thinking forward. So in case teams do bolt, you need to have some good brands coming in so that when you renegotiate the TV deal, it can still be a good deal. First things first, try to get that deal shortened and increase the pay per year per team. For the Big Ten, that's a good question. Of course, getting USC and UCLA was the home run. Home run. That was the best decision they could have possibly made. I think what they're doing right now is fine. I would also wait on Oregon and Washington, maybe see what happens with ACC. If nothing happens, give it a year or two, whatever. If nothing happens, then you pursue Oregon and Washington. If it's not going to bring on an antitrust lawsuit, that's a big if. If it does, stay away from them. Wait for the Pac-12 to implode itself, and then you can grab them. But wait on the ACC. Get those brands as well. Extend yourself south. The teams that I would get out of the ACC, if I were the Big Ten, I would definitely get North Carolina and Duke, and then Georgia Tech. That last slot would depend on if Virginia Tech or Miami get AAU status. If you're stuck on that criteria, and I'm assuming I can't change that criteria, because if I can, then I would change that. But I'm assuming I can't change that criteria. So I would see if, and I'm hearing that Virginia Tech's really, really close. So if Virginia Tech gets it, then you get Virginia Tech. If they don't, and Miami gets it, then you get Miami. But if neither one of them get it, then you get Virginia. And then see what happens with the Pac-12. Who do we have left? Who have I not done? Big 12? Have I not done the Big 12?
Hearing all this, you know what it tells me? It tells me that you need a hobby. You think too much about this. I'm gonna come and take you bowling and give you a hobby or something.
Honestly, this was just off the top of my head. Like I was like, this was not planned. Like this, if I was commissioner, this is what I would do.
I have taken all of this off since USC and UCLA went to the Big Ten. I've been off of this topic for quite some time, but I will say, yeah, I'll start with the Big 12. If I'm running the Big 12, if there's a conference that understands what it's like to have teams and programs that play second fiddle to another program, meaning Texas, and get snubbed and discarded for the likes of a Texas, and that's one of the reasons Nebraska left. It's the members of the Big 12. They can go to Oregon and Washington and say, yes, there's more money in the Big 10, but they are already putting you off. They've already said no. I know that it's technically hang on, hold, but if you want someone, if you want a school, if you want a program, then you're going to take them. So if the Big 10 is being this hesitant, this would be my pitch from the Big 12. If the Big 10 is this hesitant, there's something wrong. And once you join that league, don't expect to be given any kind of preferential treatment in a league that's got Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Penn State on down the line. So just watch. If we can get you anywhere close to a number with the added value that we could get in our next deal with our renegotiated deal currently that we should be able to strike, versus the Big 10, you're going to be treated so much better in this league. Number two, I don't have the answer to this, but I would obviously review the credentials of Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona in terms of, football brand, market brand, everything that those bring. just because Arizona State is making a lot of noise right now, they wouldn't be my priority just based on that. I would prioritize those 4 based on the value there if I'm the Big 12. If I'm the Big 10, again, I got to work through that grant of rights and exactly what that means and exactly how binding that is and what that can be worked through. I've heard all sorts of interpretations of it, but if that could possibly be worked through, then again, if I'm the Big 10, there is not a checkbox that I don't check in terms of football power. I've got it all. I've got money. I've got rear ends in the seats. I got TV ratings. I got the Big Blue Blood program. I got everything except I don't have enough football players. Now, going to California, that helps because a lot of those football players will obviously you bring them in the form of USC and UCLA, but a lot of them will want to maybe go to another school in the Big Ten, knowing that they'll be able to connect still to California. Same thing with going to Florida, which has the best football players along with Texas in the country. I go to Florida State and Miami. I just think, we've looked through the academics. They rank about mid Big Ten, both of them, in the football brands, even though they're down right now. Florida State, of course, bounced back last year. I just think they make total sense and they make that connection. To GBD's point, and we discussed this, and I've posted videos about this as well. My second priority going toward the ACC would be North Carolina and Georgia Tech. I don't know how much of a connection there is. I keep hearing, North Carolina and Duke, as GBD mentioned, also North Carolina, Virginia, that they want to stay connected. So I don't know how that would be worked out. But that's what I would do as the Big Ten. Again, the SEC, I would counter or get the jump on the Big Ten by going the Florida State, some combination of Florida State, Clemson, Miami route, if I'm the SEC. And the Pac-12, again, I just think the football brands and the population areas of the San Francisco, San Jose area with Fresno State, Northern California, not that those people watch a lot of Fresno State football, but you put them together with Cal and Stanford.
Yeah.
And you bring the likes of, Notre Dame into play, Stanford as they do now in Cal, then maybe you can generate some interest. Of course, San Diego's close to LA and you hopefully can for Pac-12 fans in Southern California that feel a bit dissed by USC and UCLA. There's other reasons San Diego State's the obvious number one choice. And I do like what you guys have to say about SMU and Rice as well.
Great basketball brand too. San Diego State has a great basketball brand.
They do.
I like, and there's one more thing that I would do as the ACC commissioner, and this is going to sound a little nuts, not going to lie. I would try to first things first, try to renegotiate the contract, shorten it, but more pay. And I would make an effort to try to get Oregon and Washington. I would.
Well, geography is completely out the window now.
Right.
That it's been slowly torn apart. And then once the Big Ten went to Los Angeles, that completely, geography's out. You might as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Now that I think about it, USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, the only way that an antitrust lawsuit gets activated if Oregon and Washington leave is if they go to the Big Ten. They can leave and go to any of the other conferences, and there's no antitrust lawsuit. It's just the Big Ten. That's why the Big Ten needs the Pac-12 to not exist if they want Oregon and Washington. The antitrust is basically designed to keep hoarding out of the situation, but we're headed in that direction anyway. So they'll figure out ways around it. But as of right now, Oregon and Washington specifically going to the Big Ten would trigger an antitrust lawsuit for the Pac-12.
And I really don't know, in addition to that, geographically, what the ACC could do outside of West Virginia, Memphis. And it's one of the reasons why, like 5 years ago, I posted a video and said if I was the ACC, I'd snatch up UCF. But that train's out of the station.
UCF and West Virginia is just But it's just a long list of bad decisions
Yep.
by the ACC, and I get the same arguments. Gold and blue, dude. West Virginia's brand is not as good as you think. The fan base is not as big as you. Not the point. I agree. It's not the biggest. I agree. The brand is not the most valuable. It's in the ACC. It becomes valuable because of the teams that are already in the ACC. Not only are you getting, it's not just, hey, we're getting the value of West Virginia. It's you're getting more value from the teams that are already in there because you get more revenue and more eyeballs when a Virginia Tech plays West Virginia, when a Pitt plays West Virginia, when a Louisville plays West Virginia, when a Syracuse plays West Virginia, when a Miami plays West Virginia. Hey, you might actually be able to squeeze out a little bit of money whenever Boston College plays West Virginia. I mean, it just helps all the way around. So it's not that the brand itself is valuable, is West Virginia is valuable specifically to the ACC.
And what also could be a tremendous brand would be the West Virginia channel at the Voice of College Football. So if you want GBD, and he's certainly not a guest. He is a main stalwart here at the Voice of College Football in regards to hosting our West Virginia.
You allow me to be here. Don't lie, Mark.
In terms of our West Virginia coverage, absolutely. But we do our best to bring on, and with Joey, of course, who's got every connection in the world, bring on really great guests. So we want to do this show every week, and we want to keep it going. But the best way to do that is get us to 1,000 subs on the West Virginia channel. Because all this has to, for as much fun as this is and how much we get into this and would love to do it for free, it is a job. And we have to pay the bills and we have to support these channels.
I guess we could start doing it, through radio frequency and no lights. That could be technically free, right?
Technically.
Please get us to 1,000. Even if you don't watch every video, that's not the point. The point is get us to 1,000 subscribers so we can get the train rolling.
Next up, college football fans, right here at the Voice of College Football, I'm going to take your calls and we're going to review the Big Ten schedules. Of course, that's been out for a long time. So we did the ACC when it was released a few days ago, the Big 12 when it was released. The Big Ten released their schedules back in October, but we had a request from a few people since we did that with the other conferences to break down the Big Ten schedule. So we will do that in just a few minutes.
Good stuff, Mark.
GBD,
I'll be watching.
We appreciate you, and we want everybody to head on over to Gold and Blue Dude's channel and check out his work. And
Mark,
there we go.
I appreciate you putting up with me, man. I really do. I know I'm a handful sometimes, so I appreciate you putting up with me.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure. Joey.
Nice being
here.
Wake
up, Joey. Wake up.
I'm awake, man. Appreciate you having me, Mark. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely, Joey. You're welcome anytime. Joey is the backbone of our West Virginia coverage as well. No question about that.
Most connected man I've ever met.
He is the guy.
Connected. Amazing. Absolutely.
All right.
It, Mark. Everybody
guys, appreciate you being here.
Have a great weekend, guys.
You too. All right, everyone. We've got a Big Ten show. It's starting in just a second. It'll take us just a few minutes to turn this around. So keep it locked in here right on the front page of the Voice of College Football, and you will grab the link and be able to join us for our Big Ten schedule breakdown.